You used the phrase that we need a pedagogy of engagement.
Right.
So I guess I have two questions for you there. One, could you just elaborate on what you mean by a pedagogy of engagement? And two, I'm aware that the word engagement sometimes means very different things to different people. And of course, the whole engagement is a proxy, is a poor proxy for learning, has been said. What do you mean by pedagogy of engagement?
The phrase pedagogy of engagement
Yeah.
comes as a response to the standard practice I see around the world, which is teachers needing to make decisions about what to do next,
Yeah.
asking a question they haven't planned in advance, having six students maybe raise their hands, choosing one of those, and if that student gives a correct answer,
Move
the
on.
teacher concludes that either the other kids would have got it right, or that having heard the correct answer, they're now ready to move on.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to point out is that if you're making decisions about the learning needs of a diverse group of learners
Yeah.
based on evidence only from the most confident and articulate students, you cannot be making good decisions.
Right.
The idea is that we need to be asking better questions and we need to be getting answers from everybody in the group rather than just the usual suspects. And so that's where cold calling comes in. Hearing from people who haven't volunteered an answer is better than hearing from just the confident students, but it's still only a few students.
Mhm.
So to make good decisions, we need much broader evidence about what's going on in the heads of the students in front of us. And that's where the idea of a pedagogy of engagement comes from. It's a pedagogy that tries to engage every student and gets evidence from every single student with mini whiteboards, with finger voting, you know, using a multiple choice question, one finger for A, two for B, three for C, so on. Even, is that sentence punctuated correctly? Yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down. So the idea that you can't really make good decisions unless you're hearing from everybody is the fundamental idea. You need to be engaging every student in responding to the question.
Yes, and that makes sense. And I guess I just wanted to follow up when because you listed quite a few different means of participation
Yeah,
there, and you often hear this argument or debate around is one form better than another? And you obviously mentioned a range there, so I'm guessing you'd advocate for not one being better than another, but choosing the most appropriate one for the type of question, for the sort of information you want to get back from students.
absolutely.
Would that be correct?
So, I've seen teachers using exit tickets
Mhm.
and getting them to answer by putting a single letter from a multiple choice question, A, B, C, D, E, on the exit ticket. Well,
Yeah.
that's a stupid use of exit tickets.
Right.
You'd be much better off asking the question 5 minutes earlier before the class has left
Yeah.
and using finger voting, because then you can do something about it.
Mhm.
I've lost track of the number of times when I was a teacher, I found myself writing the same thing on 15 different exercise books.
Right.
Why? Because I let the students leave the classroom before I discovered they didn't understand. So if I'd had a good question asked 5 minutes before the end of the lesson, I could have put the whole class's learning back on track in one go with the students in front of me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do that, my punishment was to put the learning back on track, one child at a time, in writing after they'd gone away. And so it's just basically just making the teaching more efficient. And so, yes, sometimes mini whiteboards can be helpful, especially if you don't want to use a multiple choice question, but often a well-designed multiple choice question, as the work of Craig Barton on diagnostic questions has shown, if you know what the misconceptions are, then a multiple choice question with finger voting is by far the most efficient way. And here's why it's so efficient compared to mini whiteboards. If you get students to write, I don't know, 10 words on a mini whiteboard, you've given yourself a task of, first of all, reading 300 words across a classroom and then synthesizing that into a plan of action. If, on the other hand, you use a multiple choice question,
Mhm.
what you're doing is pre-processing the cognitive task for the teacher. So now it's not making sense of 30 different responses. It's seeing that most of the students who got it wrong chose the same wrong answer. So then I can use it as a discussion. You thought the answer was A. You thought the answer was C. So the big idea here is making the teacher's job as simple as possible. There's some things you can't do with multiple choice questions, but what's really interesting is that you can assess higher order thinking, for example, with the multiple choice questions. If you think carefully about the multiple choice questions and build in plausible wrong answers into the options you offer the students. So there's certainly no one method.
Yeah.
And for me, just often, if you're writing an equation on the board, balancing chemical equations, does that equation balance? Yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's far more efficient than asking students to actually resolve, perform the equation on a mini whiteboard, for example. So it's just really just thinking about what's the most efficient, effective way of getting the evidence I need to make the decisions I need to take. And that's why I highlight this as being a shift from data-driven decision making, which is usually quite a bad idea because the data isn't useful to the teacher, a shift from data-driven decision making to decision-driven data collection. What evidence do I need to make the decision I'm about to make? And then if you start from the decision, the information always arrives just in time because you
Yeah.
know what decision you're going to make. But too often, teachers collect the data on their students' performance without any clear idea of why they're doing it, which is why it ends up as being just dangling data, as Roy Sadler calls it,
Yeah.
data that doesn't actually serve any purpose.